My name is Melissa Pitotti. I'm managing an initiative for the CHS Alliance to cultivate care and compassion in the aid sector. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Embodying Change, for which today we're actually recording this event to share with people who couldn't be here live. 2020 was a very difficult year for people around the world. We had a pandemic, we had social distancing, economic distress, stark reminders of injustice, a lot of reliance on technology. It prompted many of us in the sector to reflect on how we are working to, in the words of the core humanitarian standard, make sure that staff are supported to do their job effectively and treat them fairly and equitably. ICVA approached me last year to collaborate in a project exploring the issues of risk, leadership, staff well-being, organizational culture, and duty of care. I had the good fortune to interview leaders from the shared memberships of ICVA and the CHS Alliance, and then to participate in some focus group conversations, webinars, and podcast interviews with them. 15 leaders participated in the project, and today is the first opportunity we have to publicly discuss the final report from the project. We were going to hold an event last week, but my daughter was in the hospital, so I'm very grateful to our speakers and to the participants of today's webinar. You were able to join today a little bit later to give me some time to be with her. I'm joined today by two special guests. If you go to the next slide, Elaine, we have Eunice Ndonga, the Executive Director of RCK, and Azmat Khan, the CEO of FRD. Eunice, I met when she was a board member and I was in a leadership role at ICVA. She has been a humanitarian in refugee protection, a gender expert with over 20 years of humanitarian experience in NGO sector and the UN system. 10 years of which she spent assisting refugees, forcibly displaced populations, and host communities so they can access legal justice, protection, and durable solutions. She's also spent 10 years carrying out gender mainstreaming and inclusion programming. She's currently the executive director of the Refugee Consortium of Kenya. Hello. We will have to go on mute for those of you. Thank you. We have Eunice with us because she's got a very particular background that can bring to bear on organizational culture and staff well-being. She is currently a board member of ICVA. We also have Azmat Khan, whom I met in Pakistan when I was working on doing partnership strengthening between local, national, international agencies and the UN. We met in Islamabad and we've been in touch ever since. He's been leading the local organization Foundation for Rural Development. He has experience in leading teams in humanitarian response, both in natural disasters and man-made disasters. After some time in the corporate sector, he's been working in the humanitarian development sectors for 13 years, really driven by a passion for the work. And he's got a connection to the Interagency Standing Committee, Operational Policy and Advocacy Group, known as the OPAG. At the end of last year, that group agreed to some minimum standards for duty of care in COVID. Next slide, please, Helen. This project was a partnership between ICVA and the CHS Alliance. It was a natural progression between the work of ICVA on risk and the work of the CHS Alliance, where it got a strong emphasis on people management. And we've been doing some work since 2019 on aid worker well-being. So we've come together to look at risk, organizational culture, well-being, and leadership, noticing 5 things that are happening in our sector. First, humanitarians are under stress. According to research by people like Liza Jackins, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to be experiencing burnout and mental illness like depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Second, organizational culture is contributing to this stress. In the same research, they're finding that it's more organizational stressors than operational stressors, which are contributing to these outcomes for staff. Third, the risks are many. We talk a lot in the humanitarian sector about operational risk, safety and security, fiduciary risk, reputational risk, but we're finding that all of these risks are tied to staff well-being and organizational culture. The fourth thing that we've thought about going into this is that duty of care is fundamental, it is mandatory, and we need to be doing this in order to serve the people that we are meant to serve. And five, leadership. Leaders are crucially important. Leaders set the tone at the top, and they have a tremendous influence on their organizational cultures, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Next slide, please, Helen. We've got in the core humanitarian standard on quality and accountability, updated guidance notes and indicators that talk about culture and well-being. On this slide here, we've got some examples about how we need to be having a culture of open communication. We have cultures where complaints are taken seriously. We have cultures where people feel they can openly discuss if they have any conflicts of interest. And an agency's duty of care to its employees includes promoting their mental and physical well-being to avoid long-term exhaustion, burnout, injury, or illness. So that's just to give you a framing of where we have come from in going into this project. And then to tell you a little bit about the project itself. Next slide, please. We did a mapping among the memberships of the CHS Alliance and ICVA, and we were able to find 15 leaders. Yes?
I think I will have muesli.
Okay. We were able to find 15 leaders who were able to participate, and you'll see them here from all over the world. We were very happy to have these people participate. And when I interviewed each of them or they were participating in events, you could clearly see the passion that each of them has for the work. Next slide, please. The project team was myself doing the interviews and reporting, Marianne Clements, who many of you know from the Healing Solidarity Initiative, who is facilitating focus groups and giving guidance, and Rachel Jacquot, who is helping me analyze the transcripts and supporting me with the project. We had this with support of ICVA and the CHS Alliance. So now I'd like to just give you 4 key takeaways from the report and then turn over to our guests to get their reactions. The first is about risks. What risks were these leaders most concerned about? Well, all of the standard core risk categories seem to be relevant when we talk about staff well-being and security. We found that a lot happens with the ethical issues that kind of underpin everything about, are we fulfilling our duty of care? We found a lot of leaders were worried about operational risks as they relate to things like staff retention. Are we able to maintain our staff? If there's a high turnover, that affects our ultimate outcomes. There is a lot of discussion about safety and security incidents that are more likely to happen if our staff aren't feeling well, if our organizational cultures aren't supportive. But what struck me in the answers I got from leaders is that you could actually map them better to the Maslach burnout inventory risks. These are the 6 risk factors for burnout. A lot of it relates to workload being too overstretched. It relates to issues of fairness. Do you feel that you're treated fairly in your organization? It relates to issues of reward. And here's a lot to deal with recognition. Are you feeling rewarded or recognized for your work? It deals with values alignment. Do you feel when you come into the organization that the organization is operating in alignment with the values? A lot of people felt there was a little bit of a distinction there. And it deals with things like your work relationships. Do you feel like you have strong work relationships? These are really important, and also a sense of control or autonomy when in today's world we're having more and more compliance requirements that lead you to not feel safe. So these are the kind of risks that were coming out of the conversations. If we go to our next slides, what are the key challenges that these leaders found in the way that our sector has to work? And 5 really came out strongly in the interviews. First, that we're operating naturally in a humanitarian development context, in disrupted context, where there's been generations of trauma, where we have people going through natural disasters and man-made disasters that lead to a lot of anxiety, insecurity, instability. Second, that we've internalized oppressive systems. Azmat, who's going to be on this conversation, was talking a lot about the historical and social context that we operate in. We're not immune in our organizations to those contexts and how the power dynamics play out in our personal interactions. Third, this came out very strongly, for example, with Marvin Parvez with the CWS Asia, we are in a very competitive environment, really seeking resources and fighting for survival. And that leads to a lot of tension and affects how we behave with one another. Fourth, the bureaucracy. You see a picture here from the Less Paper, More Aid campaign. This is where we have a lot of paperwork, reporting, compliance requirements, lots of different requirements from different donors. And this creeps into our day-to-day work and creates additional stressors. And the final thing that was brought up by a lot of the leaders was this idea of self-sacrifice. There are a lot of people in our organizations who come in because they're very idealistic. They want to serve, they want to make the world a better place. And they feel that they can't really say no when the work comes to them and say, I have boundaries, I need to stop, I need to rest. There's a real prone tendency to self-sacrifice, which can lead to higher rates of burnout. What's the next slide? The next slide, we're talking about the CEO role. What can the CEOs in these organizations do to try to address staff well-being and improve organizational cultures? Here we got a lot of different ideas from the people we interviewed. The number one issue is modeling self-care. This is the idea of, I am going to be taking time off to rest. That encourages staff to do the same. If I never take time to rest or recuperate, then our staff may not feel the ability to do so themselves. Two, openly discussing stigmatized topics like mental health has been seen as something that's very important for the leaders to do, to make sure that there's space in the organization for these issues to surface. Three, recognizing the contributions. We had one leader who does herograms, where once a week or more often, she will send a message to someone, just recognizing them. I noticed you did a great presentation, or you did a great result with that project that you did, just to make sure people feel that they're valued in their organization. Five, using the position fairly and responsibly, so people see decisions are being made in a way that the different contexts have been weighed and a decision has been made fairly. Six, there's an active listening to different perspectives that can come through surveys, but also there can be town hall meetings where a leader is seen as really trying to listen and to get people's perspectives from all over the organization. A lot of this used to happen pre-COVID, when we would take trips to the field and you would go ahead and see people from different parts of the organization. Now with COVID, there are some leaders who are really trying to schedule time in with different people over Zoom. Communicating with authenticity. Here are several leaders said they feel like they need to show their vulnerability. They need to show that they're also struggling, that they're also grappling, especially with the difficulties we're experiencing this year. And giving people space to speak when there might be some difficult conversations to be had. Finally, with regard to the workload issue, finding ways to really prioritize, recognizing that maybe there are some issues with our capacity. We can't do everything. So let's prioritize what's most important. And then how can we cultivate care and compassion in our organizations? It takes some intentionality, reflection, maybe some skills development of the leaders themselves. Final slide before we hand over to our guests is this idea of solidarity. When asked, the leaders were coming up with ideas, what can we do together, recognizing that in our sector, people are going from organization to organization. They're bringing their issues with them. We have real interdependence among our organizations in the sector. To tackle these issues of well-being and culture collectively, the following ideas came out. We can try to learn together. We can try to pool our resources. We can try to open up to find ways to talk about issues of power, of equity, of mental illness, of issues related to racism and colonial legacy that have been internalized as oppressive systems. We can try to find ways to understand each other's roles and responsibilities through exchanges, things like that. We can try to build trust by giving trust to each other, giving people space to try new things and fail. We can try to imagine a system built on solidarity rather than destructive competition. We can organize and bring people together to talk about these things. And we need to lock in the conversation in a way that's sustainable past COVID and when these kind of conversations fade. So I want to turn over now. We can stop the slideshow, Helen. I want to ask our two guest speakers, Eunice and Azmat, given that presentation, what might resonate with you particularly about those risks, challenges, opportunities for solidarity? Let's start with Eunice. Eunice, can you turn on your video and then we'll and unmute yourself, and then we'll hear what surprises you or resonates with you from that presentation.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And first I want to congratulate you and appreciate CHS Alliance and ICVA for undertaking this study. It is really timely, coming at a time when everyone is struggling to understand what is happening in the workplace and basically even in the way we engage. So it's really, for me, the findings resonate very well. Most of the issues that the other leaders highlighted are issues that I personally have gone through as a CEO of an NGO. When COVID set in, I think all of us were really struggling when the government said people should work from home, people should stop, coming together, social distancing, all those measures that were put together by the government meant a lot of many things. And I'm going to give my perspective from a local NGO perspective. I noted from your discussions, you had a lot of perspectives from international NGOs. I will bring a slightly different perspective, the same issues, but maybe impacting differently or being addressed in a more different way. First, I must say then that all the issues resonated well. Humanitarian work is very, very difficult, and it brings a lot of stresses that are related to the operational work, and like you say, also from the organization operations. For instance, there is a lot of secondary trauma that is transferred from the people we serve to the people that are serving them. So if someone, for instance, has gone through, let's say, a series of crises, and you're listening to this, you must be very difficult if it doesn't impact you. So you find that our burnout is double-edged. It is both from the work that we are doing, but also the systems within the organization. So what does this mean when now we are told to work from home? First, the concept of working from home didn't make sense for many organizations like ours, because that means that there are certain resources that quickly need to be turned into that kind of work. Technology, how do we adapt to technology? And we are talking about local CSOs where in terms of resources, donors are not keen to give co-financing to local organizations. So resources that can be quickly turned into adaptation. So you find that now we are struggling. We have to be speaking the way we are speaking now. I have to be relating to staff the way we are relating now, but yet we didn't have those kind of resources. So that was very stressful, not just for the staff, but also for the CEOs. How do you raise resources that will enhance that? Staff have to be able to work effectively. We were still able to somehow, burn out. I'll give. Am I still? Can I be?
It froze a little bit. It froze a little bit.
Okay, let me just continue now. So what I was saying is that before the COVID, we had this culture as an organization where during lunchtime breaks, we would sit together and have lunch together. And that was where, and we would not discuss work. We would discuss politics, we would discuss anything else besides work. And that was our way of debriefing, removing stress. And for 1 hour, we are not discussing work. And it used to be very helpful. People would laugh. You'd come with your food, and we are all seated together eating our different foods from our homes, but of course not sharing the food, but sharing ourselves. And then suddenly that is stopped. So one of the challenges I found was, how do you monitor what staff are going through? And what we started speaking, for the first like 3 months, we didn't even know that we could go on leave. Like, because we are working from home, we assumed that home is like, we already, I mean, it's your home. So that was, then I realized, no, there's a problem. People are burning out. In meetings, some people are not speaking, or sometimes people are getting very irritable. So that was a sign that something is wrong. And I started encouraging people to go on leave. And I took leave. I was the first person to take leave, and I took like 10 days. I said, we must go on leave. We have a policy on leave. We are not going to accumulate leave days, so let's go on leave. The other challenge we had is for staff who are working in the field. The process was, when you go to the field, when you come back, you have to isolate for 14 days. And for some time, and you see, remember, these are people coming for R&R, and they would combine with their leave days. But then they have already isolated for 14 days. So the question was those 14 days leave all part of working? And I realized it's also causing a lot of stress to staff. So I decided that is not part of it. When you isolate, just continue working remotely, because you're not sick, you have just isolated yourself. And then after that, you take your leave. But even at the organization level, we had to adjust a lot, because remember now, on top of, if the staff was supposed to be away from the field for 2 weeks, then it meant 4 weeks, because the isolation time is part of working. Yeah, because you can't tell someone that because the government tells you you have to isolate yourself for 14 days when you come from the field, then it takes up your leave days. Right. So and that was causing a lot of stress. And another thing I have seen, Melissa, is that you have, as a CEO, you have to be very keen to look out for the unspoken language. Not all the time staff will be able to say things, but sometimes you can just look at people and know there's something wrong. Sometimes you need to see a manager and just know that it's not okay. And unless you develop a one-on-one where managers are free with you, then it's not possible to know when they are behaving different. And that the unspoken language sometimes is much more, speaks much more than the spoken. Because when you ask someone, how are you feeling today? They'll say, I'm fine. But what is fine? So you have to be able to cultivate that culture where you understand people and they understand you, so that then you can quickly tell when they are speaking a different language without telling you. I think the other thing I noted, and this is a culture that as an organization we have held for many days, for many years, is the issue of debriefing. Debriefing is where, as an organization, we always set aside some resources where we go out with a professional who speaks to us together as a team, but also do some team building activities. So these things can be relating to work. How is work affecting us? But also it can also relate to anything else. How does work and our other life interface, and how is that affecting us? And now, remember, these used to be physical meetings, but suddenly now we can't do them. Right. And I struggled with that a lot. How do people are stressed, and the question of who takes care of the caregiver started having a lot of meaning for me. Yes. We remember in my organization, we have counselors, we have legal advocates who listen to people's problems. And now we are asking ourselves, so we are listening to them through phones. We have to cultivate a new form of trust with our clientele. Remember that we have been meeting with them physically, but these are the same people now we are telling, you will be telling us your problems through the phone or through a platform like this. So we are cultivating our trust with the people we serve, but at the same time, so now the question is, how do we care for the caregiver? And that became very, in fact, sometimes in our meetings, it was almost speaking out, you know, how do we care for these ones? We can't now go for debriefing. And at one time now, we organize online debriefing sessions where we would still bring and when we spoke with the professionals that used to take us through these debriefings, most of them also didn't know how to do it. They were like, but now we are used to doing it this way. How do we do it online? We struggled to get someone who could do that. But we were finally able to bring a few professionals who could speak to us. But when things eased up, I can tell you, we went for one physical debriefing. I had to convince my board to agree because the board was almost like, no, you can't. But things, I mean, like things had eased down. We were able to get a facility that was very well in terms of, you know, facilitated in terms of managing social distancing and ensuring that we are not going to, you know, we were safe. But the staff members danced outside a compound, and they danced aloud and a lot for like 4 hours continuously. And I can tell you, after that, it was a different organization. People let go. And because this working from home was a different concept, and it was causing a lot of problem. Many times staff would come to meetings with their children. I mean, like, you are home, you're a mother, your daughter is there and they can see you. So someone will say, I have tried to hide, I'm now in the kitchen because my daughter is following me around. Another one is saying, no, I have hidden where. So you, as a CEO, you have to understand those things. And I remember one time, one of the male colleagues said something like, how can we have a meeting when we hear children speaking aloud? And I say, how can you say something like that? Because people didn't understand. It's just like the way some organizations have creche for women to come with your babies. We recognize that women and men who had small children were dealing with so many other issues, not just work. The family had become too close now. And those are issues as CEOs we had to address. So like the study found out, as a CEO, as a leader, you must lead from the front. People also must understand your unspoken language. It is not just you to understand them, they have also to understand, so that when they see the CEO is not smiling today, they do not think it is them. You know, so and I think also one of the issues I've realized is hard to practice as a CEO is being human, being you.
Yes.
Because the stressors are too many.
Yes.
And you need to be firm, even as you want to support. The issue of motivation. Many times staff see motivation more sometimes maybe from a monetary perspective, but do you have the money? I mean, so balancing motivation from just, you know, small things to monetary value is very, very important, so that staff know that you may not have the resources, but you're proud of what they are doing. And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy when you have a staff of 60 and you must balance those feelings that every one of them feels the same. So one of the things I've seen is like what the study said: give compliments when it is necessary, but give it on time. Don't wait until something that was done 4 months ago that you're appreciating today. So you must be keen to reward immediately, and also reward when others can hear, you know, catch them at the right time. Because if I keep only telling you you're doing well, you also want other people to, you want the others to hear that someone else did well, and they feel proud of that. But don't only appreciate one and never appreciate others. So it's that balancing and knowing that it's not every action that must be appreciated, but when small things happen, just appreciate the person. And I have seen that it goes so well when it is done when others can hear, so that they appreciate it. At the same time, the issue of values of the organization and living the values. One of the things we do as an organization is to ensure that during induction process, all the staff members really understand our values. But also what we have done is a studying in all our staff meetings and senior management meetings, we have certain topics that are studying agendas. One of them is the issue of flood and risk management, so that it doesn't matter how many minutes we have on the to discuss other issues, but that is a studying agenda, so that if we have new staff, every other time we are reminding people about the duty of care, about like PSCA, issues of flood, and how to remain accountable to yourself and to the organization. But these days we have also introduced something else. Every meeting starts with us. Like every staff has to tell us, how are you feeling? Are you okay with your family? The fact that we have not been meeting physically many times. So that and I have seen that working very well. The other day we just asked such a question, and one of the colleagues said, I'm not fine because my whole family has tested positive for COVID. Can you imagine the stress? And the family is not here, is away. And the person is in Nairobi. So you can imagine what the person is going through.
Right.
And after that, after the meeting, I was able to reach out now directly to the specific staff and ask what help they may require. So that one question of, initially when we started asking that, people will not say much. They just say, I'm fine, we are okay. Right. But then with time and I also talk about myself. And I will also say, I am feeling like this. I am feeling like now I'm really struggling to cope. That way, then they realize I'm also human, and we are all human. So, so that one of leading from the front, affirming people, listening to the unspoken, and also creating time to care for others. Creating time to listen, but also the caring for the caregiver. We have that facility now where even individually, from our medical provider, staff can access professional counseling, even as individuals, but also as a team. And then we have also gone through what we call grief and grief and loss, because we also recognize that during this period, many people have lost even loved ones. They could be distant relatives, it could be relatives, it could be friends. And so we have also gone through that, and it comes up after every quarter, grief and loss, so that people understand how to grieve, how to go through loss, and also that they can ask for time off when they are experiencing something like that. I think the issue of risks to the organization. Definitely the risks are many, and I resonate well with the risks that were identified by my colleagues. The question of organizational reputation, the fiduciary risks, all these, but they are all related to the staff well-being. And at the same time, I find that even more strong for local organizations. Donor regulations, they are so heavy on us. Very little resources. But then what did it mean? With COVID now, we realize we have even to write more proposals. So you're finding, we are fundraising, but we are also working. We have targets, It's a lot, it's heavy. So sometimes even the organization doesn't have enough resources in terms of systems. So the risk is high. But then the question is, how do we mitigate? How do we mitigate? I think it's the recognition as an organization that there are higher risks, even just measuring efficiency from the perspective of staff. They are working from home. I mean, like, I'm not saying that when you work physically, that is when you deliver, but it's a mindset change, but also a paradigm shift in terms of how do you ensure that when someone says I'm working from home, they are really working, it's and also delivering, so the risks are very high, but I think one of the greatest thing I've seen is trust, cultivating trust, but also ensuring that all of us understand our values, understand our systems, but also being there to provide the support that is required. I've seen quite a few staff members who had pre-existing conditions getting more and more sick. I mean, getting sick more because what I would say, the safety nets that were there through physical discussions are not there. I guess maybe more stresses at home, when you are there with your children, with your every other family. I think that stress and and I have been trying to understand what is it that is, I mean, they were already, of course, predisposed, they were already experiencing challenges, but you find that the rate is slightly higher than it was. So I'm trying to still understand, but I think it is just that home environment and the fact that other than maybe they can call and, but it's not as easily just walking into an office and talking to someone. As a CEO, I have an open door policy where staff can just walk in and not necessarily to discuss work. And I think that has really helped, because sometimes you'll find someone just come and tell me I'm unable to work because of 1, 2, 3. And the fact that they know they can do that and they are not abusing it, I think that is important. So I think maybe I first stop there and ask my colleague to speak. But I remember you asked the other CEOs what drives them. Right. I like to say what drives me. I'm driven by passion, the work I do. And one of the things I believe is that while I may not change the world because there are many humanitarian needs, small, incremental, but lightful actions can change the lives to ensure that people live dignified lives. Even if it's 2 people, even if it's 5 people, those people who will be dignified because of those small actions cumulatively will change the world. So that is what drives me. And that is why I wake up every day to do what I do.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to end it, Eunice. Someone has put a heart in the Zoom. Before I turn it over to Azmat, just to encourage people, if they have comments or questions in the chat, you can, and we'll have at the end some discussion time as well. I was very intrigued by Madwa's in the chat comments about something called social accountability. And we've talked about that a lot in the discussions around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. In an organization where you have a culture that's supportive, if you see behavior or you hear comments that may be harmful to your colleagues, and you step in and address it immediately. And Eunice, you gave that example of a colleague who was saying something about the fact that people had to bring their children to the meeting, and you were able to step in and speak for those colleagues. These kinds of behaviors in terms of social accountability seem to be really helpful in cultivating a culture of care and compassion. I want to give a shout out to Maria Thorin, who's participating today, who really emphasizes mechanisms and tools to cultivate compassion. And you exemplified that when you say in the beginning of your meetings, just check in with the colleagues. How are you doing? and compassion discussions, we talk about how are you doing? What do you need? These things are really key. I want to turn over now to Azmat to see how did you react to the report? How do you think we can work together to address? And we need to leave some time for conversation. So over to you, Azmat.
Thank you, Melissa. And you and Eunice both have covered the topic from so many angles that I fear that I have just a few things to share. First of all, the report is resonating, and specifically this one portion where the self-sacrifice is glorified in the sector, and we need to sort of think about that again and see if we are giving care, who is going to care for us. So so many things resonate with our work here in Pakistan. When we talk of the organizational culture and all this culture of duty of care and well-being, and we consider the organization as a silo, or when we give this sort of theoretical leadership role to a CEO or board of an organization, then our understanding becomes very partial of the issue, because we are operating in an ecosystem where our well-being is affected by so many actors, even outside our organizations, our partners, our donors, our communities, the places where we are working. They all affect the well-being. Like the audience and the contributor to the report may agree or may not agree to what I am saying next is, but the burnout is not necessarily from the amount of work we are doing. The burnout may come from the environment in which we are working. Like if we are working in an environment where we have a lack of trust among our own staff members and among the management and among the field staff, and or we have a very nosy boss whose nose is everywhere, who if we have a nosy donor whose nose is everywhere and who is managing things on in your part, this frustration and this burnout and these mental issues come over. So my point on this is that for well-being, even if you are sort of mean with your words of appreciations for your staff, but you are appreciating them with your actions. You are trusting them. You are giving them an environment where they feel like empowered and where they can take decisions and where they feel that the boss is not micromanaging. The boss is sort of trusting with my capabilities. So it boosts the morale of your team, and they deliver. So a few things which we need to do for institutionalizing this duty of care and sense of well-being is that we need to sort of zoom out from our own organization and look to things from the perspective of a sector or a humanitarian community. Like duty of care is partly quite resource intensive exercise. Like, for example, if you are sitting in a donor agency and when you are negotiating your budgets with your partners and you are providing them just neck to neck budget, like, okay, this is the target, this is the timing, and you have to do it with these many people. And if any of your staff members get sick, or he or she cannot attend, and the donor, like, you do not have any replacement in your resources you cannot assign another body to that project. So it affects the overall well-being of the entire team members. All the people think that the targets are more important than our own well-being. So to give I'm going to put it in quite simple words. We need to change shoes. Like as a CEO, I need to put myself in the shoes of my team members.
Mm-hmm.
But as a donor or as intermediary partner, they also need to put themselves in my shoes and think what they will do if someone sort of treats them this way.
Mm.
So that is my overall sort of response to the report, and I congratulate you on compiling the report. Just to add this last one thing, that a single report or a single action or a single project is not going to be a word written in the stone on the staff well-being.
Right.
We need to have it in a living document, and we need to keep on improving it. And the day we have a conducive environment for our staff who are feeling fulfilled, who are happy with their work, and who are sort of not stressed, so then we can say that we have achieved some results. Thank you.
That's beautiful, Azmat. Thank you so much. On this last point, one single action won't really change for the long run. One of the reasons we chose for the report the image of a tree, the image of plants being cultivated, is this idea there's for staff well-being, for organizational culture, it requires constant nurturing. There's a need for sunlight, there's a need for water. These are things that have to be cultivated over time to thrive and grow. So that's really great that you mentioned that. I'd like to ask Rosa, my colleague from the CHS Alliance, we did have some people posing questions in the chat. Would you like to go ahead and pose those questions to us?
Certainly, thanks, Melissa. So John Mark has a question for Eunice, which is, how do you distress given the challenge of taking care of staff and accountability to the community?
Thank you very much for that question. It's really a very, very good question. Before COVID, it was easy to maybe call a friend, go, sit and chit chat, and that's within you are able to unwind. And remember that as a CEO, sometimes it's cold up there, so there are certain, you won't go and jumping around with the other colleagues. So sometimes you feel cold, and it's really good to ask that question. So after COVID, it became quite challenging to unwind. But what I've seen is also to find CEO colleagues who we are close with and who we can just talk about it. Not necessarily talk about people, but just when I'm stressed, I know I can call one of them and just say, I need to talk. That has been helpful. So it's very important to look for people who go through what you're going through, and you can just talk about it and laugh about it. And it's not easy, but I think it has helped. The other times I do, like, I treat myself. Like when things are bad, I just go and maybe have a massage, and I go to the salon and just I nice myself, for lack of a better word. In that way, and also just recognizing that you can't be able to solve all the problems. You can only do so much. So when you do a self-analysis, self-awareness, and just check on yourself and see you've done well, then learn to appreciate small gains and just be happy without changing the world. You just know that You don't have to whip yourself so much. Whatever small gains, then you need to celebrate them. So that's how I do it. And yeah, it's not an easy thing. Thank you. I hope I have helped.
Thank you, Eunice. I wonder, Maria Torin, this point comes up again and again, self-compassion. Do you want to say a little bit about self-compassion, how leaders can show self-compassion for themselves, and that will help how compassion is in the organization?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you so much. And I'll be speaking sort of from being a PhD student in compassion and teaching compassion integrity to the sector. So I really first like to say that I love that you chose the organic symbol for the initiative as a tree. And I have a picture of a tree in my for the same reasons on my Zoom account. I would like to sort of state maybe that where an observation, and it'd be interesting to see if you agree, but it's like we do not take care of the roots of this tree. And we do not have the language, we don't sort of use the language that can nourish our compassion, if it's self-compassion or if it's compassion towards others, which we tend to use the words of humanity instead, of course, in the sector. But I think that we would benefit greatly from finding the language and importing or learning from the very strong discipline that has built up during the last 20 years of compassion and empathy and altruism science. So that's sort of a big calling of mine, to bring these terms so we can have a language and be taken seriously, because we really need to speak about the nourishment and the expression of humanity, using and being strengthened by the scientific learning that has really peaked during the last years. And so we do have sort of a parallel development where we in humanitarianism have not locked into what's going on there, even though, and that's a great paradox, we are so much in the very heart of what humanity and compassion is all about. And we can use any words we want to use. We can use solidarity, we can use humanity, we can use compassion, we can use empathy. But we also come from a Western philosophy. So that's important also, that now that we are more aware of our sort of neo-colonial roots, we need to invite other interpretations. And they seemingly align with the new scientific findings of the importance of emotions, the importance of positive emotions for quality care and quantity care. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I wasn't planning on asking you, but the issue of compassion comes up again and again. So definitely we'll keep that conversation going. We have a few minutes left. Rosa, we have a question posed in the chat. Do you want to raise that with Azmat?
Yeah, I think so. I think it relates actually about language that can nourish perhaps, but how can you encourage people to open up or make the conversation go both ways without being too intrusive?
This is really an important question, and I'm thankful to Maria, who talked just before me, and some really amazing thoughts on answering this question is that the altruism and empathy as a leader we are exhibiting within our working environment do encourage the open communication, like this is not being intrusive, to be concerned about the well-being of your team. What makes a difference between intrusion and empathy is that if you are sort of open with your team regarding their well-being, you do care about their well-being, that is one thing. And if you have assigned a task to a staff member or a team of staff, and you are going after every 1 hour and asking them, what have you people made out of that? Oh, you have done this. Let them give them the trust and adopt this altruism and empathy within yourself. Give your team a feeling that you are trusting them with the work, but you do care for their well-being. And not just telling, actually communication is with the actions as well. If a staff member is telling you that she or he is not feeling well, and you have communicated with the words in every manner, but you are telling them whether you are feeling well or not, but you have to give me that report by today, close of business. So that will not sort of promote the open communication. Then the people will not tell you about the problems. So sort of perform this empathy and this altruism with your actions, not just your words. So that is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Azmat and Eunice, we have reached the hour. So we're going to close the conversation. But before we do, I just want to thank you both for coming on live to talk about topics of staff well-being and organizational culture from a leadership perspective. With other people listening, it's not the easiest thing to do. So you've shown leadership by talking about your personal reflections and your context and sharing. And I think that deserves a big round of thank you for that. We appreciate it so much. We also thank all of you who've joined us today. The conversation will continue. We will have on May 20th and 21st, a global gathering. The gathering is called Living Our Values, Care, Culture, and Power in Aid Organizations. It will be over 2 days. We'll be having a chance to go deeper into these conversations and explore ways to connect people who have been looking at these issues from different perspectives and seeing how we can collaborate and inspire each other going forward in solidarity and support. We'll also be sharing this conversation on the podcast called Embodying Change. We also have shared the full interview done with Julia Sanchez, the Secretary General of ActionAid International, and Nasser Haghamed, who is the CEO of Islamic Relief Worldwide. Those are available now if you'd like to hear them on the podcast. So much thanks to Helen, who's helped us on Zoom, Sharena, who's helped us on social media, to Rosa, who's helped us with the chat, and to our speakers, Eunice and Azmat. We wish all of you a successful end to the HNPW, which is closing this afternoon, and take care and treat yourself with compassion. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Enjoy. Have a nice day. Huh?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.